Good afternoon, and welcome to the Real Deals interviews, where we talk with the biggest players in the real estate industry. Today, I have with us Don Peebles. He's the founder and CEO of the Peebles Corporation, active real estate investor and developer across New York, Miami, DC, and many other markets. Don, good to be with you.
Good to be with you as well.
I hope you're doing well considering all this.
I am. Considering all of this, we're trying to make the best out of it. I'm making the best out of it I can, spending more time with my family, and also using it as a time in our company to kind of reflect and plan out what the future looks like for our business.
I'm sure. So, developers have been through challenges. I think optimism is the name of the game, and you've probably seen some major upheavals in your time, multiple cycles, a terrorist attack, many things. But this is very strange. And this is a situation where we don't have a clear ending point, except I watched you just on Fox last night, and you actually said that it's time to get people back to work. And I wanted to jump right into that and think about, talk about how you got to that conclusion.
Well, I think that, look, first of all, human life is extremely important and the most valuable thing in this world. And so we have to do all that we can to protect it, but we can't do it with blinders. And I think what's been happening now is we've been, as a nation, protecting everyone with blinders on and not looking at the other impacts that this is having on our country. 17 million new unemployed Americans in 2 weeks. That's going to keep climbing. Hundreds of thousands to millions of small and mid-sized businesses closed. Many will never open again. And so those kinds of economic impacts are critical to be focused on, and we need to add them to the discussion because we are in a capitalistic democracy. Our democracy is preserved in a large part because of our capitalistic system. If we dismantle what has taken hundreds of years to build, we are in the wrong place. And so we have to be careful to balance that out. And so what I'm saying is, let's not use blinders. Let's look at a wide angle lens and look at the country as a whole.
But I think the critical point here is you're saying get back to work when, that sort of flies in the face of what, President Trump's own medical experts, Dr. Fauci, has been saying, look, we need to take this very seriously. Yes, this is devastating economically, but this is not even close to what would happen if we don't take this seriously, if we don't flatten the curve, so to speak, and get people safe. And then we can think about the levers of the economy.
Well, first of all, by the way, doctors are trained to save lives, all lives, and do whatever is necessary to save lives. They're not business people. They're not political leaders. So they're doctors. And so, of course, they're going to take whatever measures are necessary, however extreme they may be, to save lives. And that's their responsibility and that's their role. Leaders' roles, political and business, governmental leaders, our role is to look at things in balance, look at the nation as a whole. And the nation as a whole needs its economy. This is the most powerful, the largest, most productive economy in the world. We are the most powerful nation in the world. We cannot lose ground in those two areas. And so, because greater and larger numbers of lives will be at stake if that happens. So our security of the nation is dependent on that too.
Are you saying get people back to work? What does that mean? I mean, the economy has shifted quite radically, not every sector, but a lot of people have, just like you and I, have transformed their businesses to an online first business. But what do you mean by when you say get people back to work? Can you break that down a bit?
Sure. I mean, let's look at this in the kind of broad view of what this disease does and who it affects. There is a high risk category of people. They need to be protected. They should voluntarily home shelter. They should, look to take all precautions to protect themselves from being exposed. However, about 80% of the country is at a low to moderate risk. Half the country is at an extremely low risk. So those people who are at that low risk area, those who have already been exposed to the virus and have recovered or never gotten sick, they can go back into the workforce. And so what I'm saying is that, look at our wars. When men were off to fight wars, it was women who were working in factories. It were
Mhm.
women who were actually helping build equipment for our military. So they did their part. And so our at-risk Americans, they deserve to be protected, and their way of life and this country's way of life deserves to be protected. And so people at a lower risk should go back to work. And if we did that, the disruption on our economy would be far less. And look, while I'm here and you're here, we're working using technology. We can't build buildings remotely.
Mhm.
We can't build cars. We can't run factories remotely.
So,
And
so let's talk about that. So let's zoom into the real estate industry for a minute then. And so what's happening with your sites at the moment, or people, your colleagues and people in the industry? Everything is pretty much frozen at this point, correct? There is some there are some exemptions, but it's by and large pretty much frozen up at this point.
yes, and so for our company, we have several large-scale public-private developments in Los Angeles, for example. We're building a $1.8 billion development project in downtown LA. We've got a $500 million development project in the planning stages in Boston. So several of our projects are very large, and they're in the planning stages. So what we're doing now is we're evaluating what steps we should take to make those projects more reflective of where we think the market's going to go. Then there's some other projects that are in the development phase or where we're getting ready to break ground. We are now re-looking at those projects. So we are taking a different perspective here, because I think that this pandemic will further disrupt or accelerate the disruption on business sectors in the real estate space that were already disrupted. I mean, retail was already disrupted by technology. The hospitality industry already disrupted by technology. The office market already disrupted by technology. So you look at these sectors and you understand now they're going to now have this disruption accelerated. So we now start needing to look to regroup, and that's what we're doing as a company. And that's what I would encourage other people.
You're rejigging sort of the offering that you have. The development will have a little bit less of this, a little bit more of this, to kind of adjust for what you see in the next year or 2 years in the market, correct?
Yes, I mean, we've got, for example, 2 hotels slated for the commencement of construction within months. We are now reevaluating those. One's a hotel with condos as a mixed-use development. One's all hotels. Clearly, there's no capital markets for those types of projects right now, and it would not be wise of us to proceed with them as is. However, the ones that, Angels Landing in downtown Los Angeles, a $1.8 billion project with 2 hotels, condos, and retail, there, we're going to keep moving forward to the planning stage, because the goal there is to open it up by the Olympics when the Summer Olympics come to Los Angeles. But it's now, I think right now it's almost impossible to responsibly underwrite any kind of development deal or any real estate investment right now, because we don't know how our society is going to react to what is
Right. I think that's the big point, right? There's no clarity on. I'm curious. You're talking to lenders, I'm assuming, since this has all happened. What are lenders saying to you?
Wait and see. They're focusing on dealing with the portfolio that they have right now. And look, I think that residential lending for home buyers and apartment buyers, that's going to continue because people have to put their bodies somewhere. But hotels, we've been told by the capital markets that hotel financing for new projects or any type of hotel financing is 6 months out to a year out before the market resumes with any kind of functionality. But I think people are more worried about, the office market. I've been for the last year and a half, thinking that the New York City office market should be shorter because I think WeWork and co-working in general staved off the execution. I mean, otherwise, you look at other metropolitan areas like downtown Washington, D.C., where office vacancy rates are in the upper teens. New York City's been spared that because you've got good, technology sector coming into the city, but also co-working.
Exactly. To that point, I think even though people always question the value of offices, then you see these massive transformative leases on the west side of Manhattan, for example. You see Amazon coming in and taking, even though they didn't take that campus, a lot of politics involved in that decision, they've come in and I think leased over 2 million square feet since that whole thing happened, right? So the office market in New York, until this point, was looking pretty robust. And now I think people are questioning, hey, look, this sort of knocked me off my track, but why do I need all this office space? Even the big companies are asking these questions.
Absolutely. I mean, our company, we are evaluating now. We have two leases in major offices for us running up this summer, Washington, D.C. and New York City. And those are two very expensive markets to operate in.
Mm-hmm.
Our team has been operating remotely since this crisis took place. But I, as a business person, have been operating remotely for at least a decade, probably longer, because we have projects in 6 different cities right now, and we've been in as many as 8. And so I travel to them, and there's no way to run a business like ours without technology and working remotely. And we are, with multiple offices, we're always communicating in mediums like this. And I believe that's the way of the future, because we're now asking ourselves, how much office space do we need? I just finished a call with our CFO yesterday. Mm-hmm. Recommending that we look at remote working permanently and going into a convene or some other structure like that, where we can have the teams get together, to collaborate maybe once a week, but otherwise work remotely. We'll get more talented people because they won't have to deal with the commutes. We'll get more productivity, and our team will have a better quality of life, and it'll be more cost effective for us. And
but when you talk about, Don, when you talk about the convenes and the WeWork, some of these companies aren't going to be around after all this. They're facing existential strains. So it's a little bit, some of these offerings that we're now taking for granted, hey, I can go into WeWork, some of these companies are going down.
Yeah, some will, or they will shrink. I mean, imagine WeWork within a 5-year period became New York City's largest landlord. It took J.P. Morgan Chase 2 centuries essentially to become, to take that role before. I mean, that made no sense.
That happened.
There is a market for that kind of space, and many office building owners are going to need to convert some of their spaces, and some are already doing it. Larry Silverstein and others are already doing that themselves, and you'll see more office building developers do provide co-working or conference space. And what we're talking about, internally, is not office space per se or desk space, but meeting space, the opportunity to come and meet as a team and collaborate, face to face, and then go on and do our business. And because our businesses is at our projects, not in an office, in Manhattan, or not in an office in downtown DC or Miami. It's out on the field where we're building our buildings.
So let me just, last question I want to ask you about just the political environment that we're in right now. So, there's been jockeying between the city and the state about what should be done, measures to stay safe, when to get back to work, what an essential industry is, what isn't. There's been a lot of that. And then there's the federal government. There's been 3 different levels of communication. Not much is happening in sync. What's your thought on that and how that's affecting the industry?
Well, I think that we're before COVID-19, took over, we were in a highly charged political environment. This is a presidential election year. It was extremely partisan. There were very strong feelings on both sides of the aisle, if you will. And so there was a lot of confrontation. The Democrats had, I think, 17 or 18 candidates. They've settled in on a candidate that many are concerned is not strong enough to be competitive and win the general election. And so you've got this political environment. And then, of course, in New York City, you've got the mayor and the governor not overly compatible themselves. And the governor being a strong leader and decisive, and the mayor a bit more,
Sure, yeah. We've heard your thoughts on the mayor before. We're aware.
Yeah. So, but I think that what you have, and then the president, kind of having his own instincts and governing from a more reactionary, instinctive place. However, I think that in this instance, the president has taken a much, more firm leadership role and been much more thoughtful than he has been on other issues in the past, and been, lack of a better word, presidential. So I think that if you look, he and the governor have worked well together in many regards. And the president actually even reached out to Mayor de Blasio to work with him. I think a very good example of a good team working together is the state of California. and with the governor, Gavin Newsom, along with the mayor of Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti. They've worked extremely well together and collectively with the White House. And as a result of that, they've been able to get all the help and support that they've needed from Washington, D.C. And so has the state of New York. I mean, there's been this environment of kind of getting along, and I think that some in the media are not liking that. I think in the 24-hour news cycle, cable news, I think that these programs and these stations that really have their existence based on conflict between the president and Congress and so on, are a little frustrated right now because there is a bit more national unity. And I hope to see more of that because that's what it's going to take to overcome this great challenge is national unity and balancing all of the interests of the nation. And those are not just health issues, but economic issues. Poverty will kill more people than COVID-19 will.
Don, we'll leave it there. I'm with Don Peebles again. He's chair of the Peebles Corporation. Don has a pretty radical idea for these times, which is he thinks that Americans should get back to work. So Don, thank you so much for being with The Real Deal, and we'll talk to you again.